Episode 43 of GBGuns Armory. We're looking back at stuff that has been reviewed in the past, been out for a while. Hopefully you guys have some experiences and opinions now, because it's not breaking news. You've actually had a chance to see this stuff, ideally. And I'm giving a little bit more of the thoughts and feels, since the main reviews are all based on facts and performance. Today's topic is the Canik SFX Rival-S. This beastly thing, and yes, it's modified. Remember, in my main reviews, I don't modify guns because I want them to run as they come out of the box to show you guys what you would experience out of the box, not what you'd experience after pouring more money into the gun you just bought. This one, since I've had it for a while, lock brass grips, which look cool, but also add non-reciprocating weight below the bore to make the gun sit in here. Brings the gun up to 3 pounds. And then I've got a Viridian FX 35. This is the big round window green dot on it. And man, is it a joy to shoot. Some of you may be wondering why something like this exists. Well, the idea being heavier guns are steadier guns. And in the competition world, that can help. I used to compete. I used to do 3-gun, which is a little bit different. The pistol portion was only part of the match, and so not everything relied so heavily on the pistol. For those who compete handgun only, the idea being that with a heavy gun, your movement is more definitive, I guess you could say. What I found, and I'll link to a video I did testing this against a standard polymer rival, and Walther has a pair. In fact, I think the Walther pair of steel versus polymer is what inspired these cannons. In this little side-by-side, I tried transitioning between targets, and what I found was the heavy steel gun was easier to stop, to come to a rest. As I transitioned, especially with a dot on it, where you really notice and feel that movement, there was less floating or settling. In stationary fire, as in firing at the same target, this extra weight is more mass for recoil to try to overcome, so it's reducing the amount of recoil that actually gets to your hand, and you end up with flatter shooting. What makes the Canik steel frame so exciting is, and I showed this in the tabletop video, I don't know if it's going to come through in this video with this camera, but it looks to me like the frame is more of a casting, whereas the Walther is a CNC billet. Why does that matter? Well, if this weren't a gun, maybe we would be worried about strength, but as a handgun, obviously polymer does just fine, so there's no concern about casting versus billet for a frame. But the castings are a whole lot cheaper to do in mass, and I believe that's part of how Canik made the price of this so much lower than the Walther. Is it the same piece of art, of machining art, handgun art? Not quite as much. Now the slide, I mean, it's still a beautiful looking gun, don't get me wrong there, but I'm talking about when you look at the frame on the Canik versus the frame on the Walther. The frame on the Canik looks exactly like the polymer one would, it's just made out of steel. They did some slight tweaks, but this gun is an absolute treat to shoot. So is there a benefit to it, or a reason to have it if you don't compete? I say there could be. One, it's a whole lot of fun to shoot, and two, it's one of those guns that helps you realize your potential. And that, much like shooting a Grand Power Excalibur, for example, it takes a lot of the challenge out of shooting and enables you to get a feel for what a smaller, lighter gun would be like if your form and skill was better. Now, I'm saying that not insulting anyone's level of shooting. This applies even to myself. It is easier for me to shoot quicker and smoother and tighter with a gun like this than it is with other guns. And I think that applies to most people. It's simple physics. There's less effort required. Now, the downfall with something like this is it does put a little more shoulder fatigue. You are holding more weight out there. I know that sounds silly. Oh, it's just a 3-pound gun. How hard could that be? It depends on the duration. A perk to that, however, especially if you are, say, learning to run a dot, or you want to train presentation height, a lot of how draws get quick, like being able to draw and be on target nearly instinctively, is your wrist, your fingers to some extent, but mostly your wrist and your firing arm shoulder knowing where their position is. I'd argue that when using a heavy firearm like the Canik SFX Rival-S, adding that fatigue helps you burn in muscle memory and helps you get that presentation to be better. It helps train your shoulder, train your muscles where the gun needs to be when. So there is definitely some value to this. If you are not a competitive shooter, you could use it for training, and I bet your draw would be much quicker, your presentation would be quicker after running something like this. Kind of in the same way that baseball players use heavier bats or bat weights in the batting pen while warming up, and then when they pick up their regular weight bat, they can smash the ball out of the park. It's kind of the same concept there. The other thing that I think is neat about this Canik is because it is priced lower, it enables more people to have that experience and play with that. Does it truly rival the steel frame Walther? That's in the eye of the beholder. There's a lot of different non-physical, non-data values there that it's just part of being a consumer and what we like and what our preferences are. But very, very fun gun to shoot. This Viridian, I've been spending more time with Viridians, and you can see, looking through that glass there, how clear the glass is. You don't have as much of an obnoxious tint as on some other things, and part of that is because the dot is green, which pops up, to me anyways, much more sharply. It's easier for me to find. I have a bit of an astigmatism, and I do not see it as obnoxiously with the green as I do with the red. I mean, I still see it, at least indoors anyways, depending on how bright I've got the dot set. I will have a guide on these Viridians later on. Currently working on one, as spend more time with more of the models, but I've been really impressed with them. I am not a dot expert, but I have used, I don't know, probably 15-20 different types over the years as they've evolved. I just don't put them in videos much because that's a modification of the gun. Additionally, I have seen dots cause failures that, especially when filmed at 25p, which is where a lot of the other YouTube channels film their frame rate, ends up looking like the gun failed when it wasn't the gun at all. It was the ammo, the brass bouncing off the dot back into the ejection chamber as it closes, and then it looks like a stovepipe, or it looks like a failure to eject or something like that. Don't worry about that. That is relatively rare, and it is highly dependent on the energy of the ammo. The dot location, you can see here we've got quite a bit of space between the ejection port and the dot. The angle of the glass and the energy of the ammo combined with the wrist of the shooter. How much oomph does that ammo provide the gun normally to eject, and how much oomph is being absorbed by a soft wrist or not by a firm wrist? There's a whole lot of variables. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but do want to talk about this guy. I'll link to the full review over at GBGunsDepot.com. I'm curious how many of you have interest in something like this, whether or not you compete, and why. In another video, we'll talk about the Walthers. They're spectacular guns. This thing definitely more affordable, though I have noticed as of late that they're not as available. I don't know if that's because they were a limited run, or if it's a production hang-up, or if they're just selling like hotcakes. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Canik SFX Rival-S, and don't worry, you can get them in black. I just like the steely color because it's a steel gun. Why not have something different? Thanks for watching.